Hiya, this is Kitten Features, and you're listening to ShowX Live with Ken in the student accommodation all the way in Scotland. Wait, that was years ago. You're listening to ShowX Live with your favorite Scotsman Ken, currently residing in the US of A, and Wayne, mostly from Colorado, but spending way too much time in the Howling Abyss instead of Summoner's Rift. Enjoy the show!
Hey everybody, how's it going? And as you can see, I screwed up the intro thing again. I need to get used to trying to do all these new banners and stuff to make it so we all look like I keep trying to do things professional and then forget to hit the right buttons. Because that was totally last week's banner thing again. So it's one of those.
Yeah, but I didn't even notice. Did you notice, Todd?
No, I didn't notice.
I noticed because I saw it and was like, what the heck?
It's mainly for the advertisement, though. That's the main
It
part.
is mainly for the advertisement.
Well, it is mainly, but still, I was like, if not, I should turn it off. But here's what I had on there, which is not what I intended, because I was trying to get to a point where no matter what I name things, it would change correctly. And then
so Wayne, I need you to swap back to the facial cameras because I have a visual gimmick.
That's
and
what
it's
it was
not going to work if I'm not on camera.
Okay, well, okay, go ahead, back on camera.
Aha! Now it's this week. See, it was last week. And so I thought we had gone to this little time warp.
Yep. Like I said, that was me screwing that up. So like I said, it was supposed to be, oh gosh. That, and for whatever reason, my GPU is like mad today. So that was the thing we put in because the reason I noticed is because of the new logo. And that was the whole point.
Ah, yes.
Trying to put the new logo
that's
on.
what we have to show off. That's true.
To be able to show that we added Todd into the logo. That was the whole point. And I screwed that up as I hadn't changed the intro piece. So that was my fault, everybody. But there we go. Now we're back. So maybe I'll try to edit, I don't know, the intro piece and put the right one over it as we get started. Regardless of all that, hey everybody, welcome to the show. It's just after 2 p.m. Eastern, 7 p.m. GMT on this Sunday, the 30th of August. We are almost done with our 8th month of 2020 already. So welcome to the show, everybody. Welcome, Todd, and welcome to you, Ken. How you guys doing today?
I am outstanding.
I'm pretty good. Yeah, I'm doing all right.
That's good to hear. As I say, as I'm getting things thrown back together here. So the worst problem was because sometime during the week, I had streamed a little bit of Overwatch of me playing. And so when I had started the earlier stream and then went to restart it again to get all the codecs right and make it cleaner, I said, Streamlabs have this great feature where you can just populate with the previous thing you put in here. And instead of it coming up with the thing I'd just done for the show, it came up with the whole, you're playing Overwatch with friends. I was like, no, I'm not. So it took me an extra moment there during the, right before the show, guys, to get it fixed this so it still says what's going on. But anyhow, we are here. So today on ShowX, top things off, Todd's going to lead us in with some information and things he wants to discuss this week. As we get into our main topic, though, we're going to be talking about something that's a little more, something that I've been kind of bouncing on and off with for some time now about, as I keep hearing random discussions about gaming and hanging out with friends and all the kind of things that people do when they get to gaming, I seem to hear a very consistent theme about stuff. And so we're going to talk a little bit about, is the gaming community itself a bit fractured? Are there, is there too much option out there? Is there too many things going on for us to really focus and concentrate on gaming? So we'll get to that in the overall part of the show, but to start things off like we do, we're going to do a little bit of our dysfunctional, if you will, and kind of just catch up with what's been going on this week. So Todd, what have you been doing this week that's not rant worthy?
That's not rant worthy. That's like I got swerved.
Yeah, wait to get them all ready for the show, then cut them down.
Oh, I want to have an opportunity for everyone to say a little bit before.
I don't know if I'm going to be able to get up again for the rant later on. God, it's you tease me that way, I'm useless for the rest of the night. Nah, I kid. 3 things really. So in 2000 and what's the date on this article? I don't know. Anyway, so about 4 years ago, I wrote an article about playing Fallout 4 as I'll be charitable as a leftist political activist, shall
Okay.
we say. Or why mince words? Playing Fallout 4 as an SJW.
Okay, I think
And,
I remember when you did that a while back.
So I wrote the article and talked about the character build and what to do and so on and so forth. And so I was recreating that character. And without getting too deep into it, essentially what you do is you max out your charisma and luck stats, and everything else is 1. Except for one stat, which you have an extra stat point. So I think I put a 2 in endurance just to get a few extra hit points.
Okay.
Okay. And then the key perk to this build is called Idiot Savant. And Idiot Savant has 3 ranks. And the proc rate on Idiot Savant is inversely proportional to your intelligence stat. So if you want the max rate of proc, you have to have an intelligence stat of 1.
Okay.
Okay. So at rank 1 of Idiot Savant, there is a percent chance. There's a percent chance to get 3 times the normal experience points anytime that you gain experience.
So, like, for any action that does experience.
Any action that yields experience points. Completing a quest, building something, augmenting a weapon, quest completion, anything. So whenever you gain experience, this thing has a chance to proc. Okay,
gotcha.
Rank 1 times 3. Rank 2 is times 5.
Like
so
5 times the XP.
Normal experience points, yes. So you kill a ghoul that's usually only supposed to yield 9 experience points, you get 45 if it procs. And
gotcha.
when it does proc, you get this. The sound effect is like a day, and you see just a huge amount of experience points pop up. And so to be good at combat, there's a bunch of other stuff that you take in the luck tree, like you can bank critical shots, and there's a percentage chance when you get a kill for your VATS meter to refill. And the Mysterious Stranger perk, which there's a percent chance anytime you shoot in VATS that this guy in a trench coat with a 45 will show up.
Okay.
Like a Dirty Harry, revolver, and shoot the bad guy with you. Just random percent chance. Anyway, it is hilariously funny until about the mid-teens.
Okay.
And then what I forgot to put in the article too, was that when you get into your mid-teens, you start to get awfully squishy. You don't have any hit points.
Well, I was gonna say, because your endurance was only 2, and what looks like strength perception
1 to 10.
And so
strength, perception, agility.
Well, and so the question then is, hit points is based on probably what? Your endurance or some combination?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, hit points is based on endurance. Which is why I put the extra point in endurance so that I could get, the little extra hit points. So I had a collision of my normal play style in Bethesda games, which is the sneaky, shooty.
Yeah, I think it's a default for
amounts of damage from
so many people.
Stealth. Yeah. But I am too squishy to do that. If I don't one-shot you, like I just don't have enough hit points to handle like actual combat.
Gotcha.
Until I got my hands on a set of power armor.
Oh yeah, okay, because power armor gives you a whole shell to work with.
I don't have to shoot things from stealth anymore, but I can walk up right into the face of pretty much everything, get my critical meters filled using VATS, and then explode somebody's head with a guaranteed critical strike combat shotgun to the face. With lots of bloody mess damage and exploding body parts.
Gibbs flying everywhere.
Oh my god. It's so much fun. It is so much. I did for those that don't know, There's a bunch of factions. It's set in Boston. You do some stuff for the first faction you meet called the Minutemen, and eventually you retake what was their old base, but their old base got destroyed by this giant sea monster, and you eventually get the quest to retake the base called the castle. You go to retake the castle, a giant Mirelurk queen pops out of the water, sort of Godzilla style, and there's a big fight. Well, it wasn't such a big fight because I had a fat man, and I had critical hits banked.
Oh, geez.
So I shot a mini nuke at the giant sea monster and guaranteed that the hit would crit for 1.5 times damage. So I think the mini nukes do something like 485 on their own times 1.5, so 730 or something like that in terms of damage. In terms of faction, I joined the Brotherhood of Steel because they have no tolerance for anybody who thinks differently than them. So to Hando's point in the chat, the SJW part is 1, low intelligence, high charisma, and high luck, because they don't actually ever do anything. They just talk about it on Twitter. And then they join the least tolerant faction in the entire Commonwealth, because if you're ideologically non-compliant for a second, you get excommunicated from the online Twitter activist circles. And that's what it is. It's hilarious. I had a ton of fun playing it. Thing number 2, I started a new EU4 campaign because it's a day that ends in Y. This time is Sweden. And Sweden is at the moment has colonized Eastern Canada and is now colonizing Massachusetts.
So just like real history then.
So just like real history, yeah. I conquered as Sweden. So, again, for those that don't know, in 1444, the crowns of Sweden, Norway, and Denmark were all unified under Denmark under something called the Kalmar Union. And so the first thing you have to do as Sweden is win your independence from Denmark. And then once you've won your independence from Denmark, the whole world opens up to you. So I conquered all of Norway's holdings, most of mainland Denmark, and have moved to the British Isles. So I'm sorry, Ken, but your Scotland is now decidedly Swedish.
It was inevitable, really, if you think about it.
It really was. It really was. So we're going back 500 years from where we are in the game, which is about 1500, to about 1000 or 900 something, when the Swedes landed in the north of Britain or wherever. Or they may not have been Swedes; they may have been Danes. But there's this thing called the Dane Law, where the Vikings landed and made a mess of things and got paid thousands of pounds of silver and gold every time they showed up. And they would show up in the spring and make a mess of things, and then they'd go take off in the fall to go home to drink and eat and carry thousands of pounds of gold with them, because the thing to do at that point was to just buy off the invading force. So anyway, that's good. And then I was watching Final Fantasy Tactics speedrun from an AGDQ and remembered that I had Final Fantasy Tactics on my iPad.
Okay.
And so I have a video game to play while I'm hanging out in bed next to the Mistress of Giggles as we're getting ready to sleep. So I started playing Final Fantasy Tactics, War of the Lions for the iPad, which is pretty good. It has some control issues, but all in all, the same Final Fantasy Tactics you remember from the PS1 days. So.
Well, I was going to say, any iPad game ever is going to have control issues, right? I mean, it's kind of inevitable. I don't think there's such a thing as a touch-supported game that is perfect.
No, agreed. It's just some of the camera angles make precision targeting of spells and things kind of annoying. But there are controls to get around that, and I finally found it. In the last couple of days, so it's been nice to be able to play with the ability to target more precisely, shall I say?
Cool.
And it's been my gaming week.
That might be
Nice.
actually quite a good topic sometime, is to just talk about the mobile games that we actually enjoy and they're actually good and they're actually, as we would traditionally call, video games, and
Sure.
not just,
Yep.
Facebook games, let's say.
Yep. Yeah, that's a good topic. Absolutely.
Cool.
Got it. All right.
That's interesting to hear. I'm not surprised that you've been playing the crap out of Europa, because that is
Because
your
when I
current-
look at
How long
Steam-
have you been playing it now for?
1,555 hours.
Nice. Yeah,
I
think
can't
there's
say
some
anything.
sort of rule that, like, you can't ever complain about the cost of a game if you take more than like 100 hours for
Oh, no.
every
If-
dollar.
Well, I was gonna say
My
if
threshold, yes. If you're,
yeah, if your hour per dollar
If
rate
you're-
of gameplay gets down to the point where it is sub-dollar
Yeah.
per hour of play, or even worse than that, because I'd say if it's
it's
down to
hours per dollar.
to dimes per hour or dimes, kind of thing of play, then you've
I mean,
probably done well.
There are a lot of games that are still worth it that are obviously much higher. I mean, for example, God of War for the PlayStation 4. I thought that was one of my favorite games of all time, but I only have like 20 to 25 hours in it because that's how long it takes to complete the
You
game.
just played it through,
And,
you didn't- yeah.
I will play it again at some point, but you just need a break in between these things.
I wonder if there's a
But,
scale we could come up with that would be like value per dollar kind of thing, combination of like
Yeah.
overall like level of enjoyment versus time of gameplay, versus
there
replayability,
must be
those
a
kind of
scale,
things.
'cause there's a level
To
of
the
quality
cost,
for sure.
well, to the cost, right?
So
To boom.
honestly, guys, I can tell you what I use.
What?
If my household gets at least enough playtime to where the cost per unit time is about $1 per hour,
Probably
then
worth it.
it's money well spent.
Well, but I
for
say
sure.
this because there's also games, right, that cost anywhere from $1 to like $10, especially on the PC space, right? Because we have that whole other discussion about value of games on the mobile space, right?
Yeah.
How that is
Yeah.
different. But $1 for a game on my phone, anything more than that's outrageous. And so I'm curious what that scale could look like to say, like, I got Duck Game for $9.99. I have only played it maybe a couple hours. But when I played it with friends, my enjoyment was through the roof. Thus, where does it fall into a value scale? Because I have a lot of games that I've only ever played for maybe, if you look at my Steam times, like half hour to an hour to maybe 10 hours or less. But every time I played it, I was like, man, that was a good time. And I only spent $5 on it. Or it was on sale. I got it with a package or something like that.
Sure.
Sorry, that's just
So,
a random
just-
thought process
Those
that come
are
up.
a big part of this conversation as well, I think.
Yeah. Well, yeah, right. So just as a perfect example, I'm looking at my Steam page right now, and it says that I have 47.8 hours played in Fallout New Vegas. Now, I didn't like Fallout New Vegas. I think it's the worst of all of the first-person Fallout games, and I would say that I got my money's worth out of it.
Okay.
Because
Just curious.
I mean, I played it through. I rolled the end credits. Fun enough, but
There you go.
compared to reverse pickpocketing grenades on people in Fallout 3, like, it just wasn't the same.
No, it is an interesting one because like one of the ones I'm looking at is Little Nightmares, and I mostly because it came to mind since the Little Nightmares 2 was on one of the Gamescom previews or whatever, one of the trailers that came out in this last week or so with the new games that are coming.
Yeah.
And I enjoyed the heck out of it, but I only spent, because to beat the whole thing, 5.1 hours on it, and it's currently a $20 game. And so it's interesting because, right, that means I spent $2 an hour for it, but I did really enjoy it.
Well, it depends what you can compare it to, right? I know we're going quite heavy on this topic when it's supposed to be just a quick suggestion, but we'll wrap it up shortly. It depends on the context, right? I mean, if you compare it to going out for a nice meal, right? Like generally speaking, if you stay at home and you cook at home, you can probably cook per head for like $2-3 per head, right? Pretty easily. Or much less, or much more, depending on what kind of quality. But I think it's fairly average to say that $2 a head, $3 a head for a dinner is fine. And I think you can say the same with video games, right? Sometimes you can easily have a game that's good that you spend $1, $2, $3 an hour, and that's fine. But just like going out for a meal is a special occasion, and you're quite happy to spend $30-$40 for one meal, which is an increase of like 1,000%, right? I mean, that's a huge increase. Sure. But you're willing to do that for certain games as well. You're willing to massively increase the expenditure if the quality and what you're getting out of it is worthwhile, even if it's much less time. Because really, the games don't exist for their longevity; they exist for their quality and longevity. As a sort of there needs to be like a ratio there for the upper bound and the lower bound of what we're willing to go for, and it depends on your current economic status.
Sure.
That's so. It's a complex model.
So another story back from the arcade days when the wireframe vector graphics Star Wars came out.
Oh yeah.
I stood in line at an Aladdin's castle for nearly 45 minutes waiting to sit down inside. It was one of the ones that you sat in. So they had speakers on like 6 or 8 sides of you. And like they had it turned up pretty loud, so it was pretty good, pretty bassy. And I just remember the like 3 minutes that I got to sit in there and play was worth the 45 minutes that I waited in line, like not playing other stuff.
Yep.
Just to be able to do the Death Star trench run.
Yeah. And that's crazy, right? Because that's that, according to our previous original models of $1 an hour, and then if you count time as how much you make, in your salary or on your parents' pocket money or whatever,
right.
Then that shouldn't be worth it according to our original.
Well, no, but like I said, that's the X factor, right? The X factor is enjoyment level, because I think that's a multiplier effect where you can do some kind of direct hour per dollar rate and get that right. That's easy. But then how do you scale it based off the enjoyment value, I think is a big part of that. And I'm actually taking notes as to let's have a big discussion about this in the future, because I like some of the comments we're getting there, even from like Unit Zero that said, yeah, there are movies, lift tickets for skiing, going to sporting events, et cetera, et cetera. So I think there's a ton we could jump into this, and we'll have to get to that. I like that.
Another funny example actually would be at my wedding. My family and my friends and my wife continually are still bringing this up because it was kind of stupid and funny of me. I saved me and my friends about £60 on air tickets to travel there and back each, which at the time I felt like was a lot of money, and I didn't really think too much about it. The 20-hour layover which we had in an airport, which it turned out due to weather conditions had everything closed. We were actually issued blankets, but they ran out of water, so they couldn't give us any water. That was in Boston Airport where we were stuck in for 20 hours. And they couldn't take off any flights because the jet fuel had frozen. Like that's how cold it was. So
direct flights.
That was a time where it wasn't worth saving a couple £100, right?
No, time is money, and I value my time. So awesome.
Absolutely.
All right. Well, it is about time for us to transition. So I don't have really much to add this week of what I've been doing, other than Ken had asked someone else had asked me before the show if I was still enjoying Microsoft Flight, which I've been playing around with, because there's something for me very soothing about just taking off to airways. And honestly, what I've been doing primarily in the simulation engine is visiting places I have been to in real life to see if I can scout them from above. I went to Elasun, and I flew over the main areas of the town there. I did not make it to Volta, although because I think I need a physical map opened up next to it, because just the air maps of airports wasn't enough for me to wait, it's down here somewhere. So I wasn't able to do that. Right. But I did today. Yeah. Well, I was very proud of myself because I flew over Tokyo this morning, And I was able to find, what's the name of the airbase? It's like Yasuba Air Base or something, but it's where my buddy was stationed, where I went out there and visited him for about a month. And so I was able to find Fusa, the airport that we were at. And from there, like I found, there's the building I stayed in. That's where his apartment was. There's where that shrine I hiked to was. There's, and so for me, I get a certain jazz out of seeing things from above like that. And I'm just really loving it.
This would be worth it just for me to hear vicariously through you if this adds anything to the experience. But I'm assuming they have New York City.
They do. They have everywhere in the world.
Yeah, do a YouTube search sometime for Kennedy Steve.
Okay.
It's a ATC from JFK Airport in New York, and it's just him talking to airplanes. It's the live
okay, I gotcha.
ATC feed to the commercial airplanes.
Okay.
And just once, you don't have to do it a lot. I just want to see if you put up some of those videos or whatever. And like as you're making the approach it doesn't even necessarily have to be Kennedy. It just if they have New York City, they're gonna have Kennedy Airport. And just to see if it adds anything, if you get any immersion, any extra immersion by listening to ATC while you're yeah.
Well, so it's fun too because they do a computerized ATC in it that is really well done. And when you're playing multiplayer with live traffic, it actually pulls in live aircraft traffic as well as other gamers. And the ATC is smart enough, it talks to all the different planes. And so even though it's in game, it talks to like taxiing aircraft, landing aircraft, things like that. I was actually watching my friend Azure Lily's stream last night real quick. And she and a friend were running a flight from South Korea to Japan, to Tokyo. A normal airline over, I think, with Airbus 320s. They were flying together where he was maybe a couple 100 feet above her as they set their cruise control, basically their autopilot through it. And so they've watched their banking and stuff, and they were just chatting and kind of doing stuff as they're going through. And of course, Lily was doing the whole like, I'm drunk flying, because she's actually working on her pilot's license. But so it was interesting to hear her kind of conversation. As they were coming to land, he actually got ahead of her, and it was fun hearing the air traffic control because he was ahead of her, so it kept telling her to wave off and like go around. And she's like, I'm landing right on his rear. What are you talking about? I'm not going to wave off, because they were kind of trying to do almost an acrobatic landing. And then he apparently landed a little hard because he said he crashed. And then she flew in like right after and was trying to pull up to get just above him. But I think it was such that when you're playing multiplayer like that, it doesn't actually have collision between planes on, because that would be a whole other level of tomfoolery going on. But, well, you can imagine for the people who use Flight Simulator as a more realistic experience of a simulation, to have people who are willing to just do screwy things interrupt their 8-10 hour simulation flight.
It can actually ruin the experience for a lot of people, I guess.
I mean, how pissed would you be?
For being a-holes.
Yes, because we did when we landed. There was some guy doing acrobatics around when they landed around the airport at Hanada, and so it was just like guy doing loop-de-loops really low to the ground, which would be annoying, if you will. I could see, but anyhow, it was neat to see how the air traffic control AI in the game talked through it all. And for me, I don't know how to like hit the radio buttons in the game yet, and so I'm just flying away. And it's like, all right, you're flying out of our airspace. Do you acknowledge? Hey, did you catch my last transmission? Yeah. Flight A332. Did you hear me? And I'm just like, doo-doo-doo. I don't know how to crack the byte. Sure. Like, I don't know how to communicate to ATC yet. I haven't gone through that. I'm like, I'll just fly.
That's pretty funny.
So it basically yells at you the whole time.
So is there any like? So I know it's a flight sim. Does it come with any sort of like missions and or quests, or is it purely just like do what you want?
Well, no, it has challenges and things like that, and actually those are really neat. It has a whole basic training thing that allows you to go through basic flight controls, take off, the proper way to approach an airport and land, how to do the circle like a basic one directional in to land, how to taxi, the basics. It also has challenges that update every couple weeks or so, and it has some base ones that are considered like hardcore challenges, and they're usually landing challenges where, hey, this airport is famous for being in the middle of the Alps and a real bear to fly into because the air corridor is so narrow and you have to bank at the last minute to line up, and then you only have so much runway. Go for it. And they score you on how little runway you can use to land. And so you can actually get world rankings based on that. And so it rates you against everyone else in the world, which is amazing. And you can see your friends versus you and all that stuff. So I did a couple of those, and granted, I am still flying solely with my Xbox controller versus having my joystick because I can't find where any of the joysticks that work with my system went in my house. I might have gifted them to others. But then, and they also have challenges that are like famous for how like severe conditions. So severe side wind, heavy rain, things like that, almost no visibility and just instrument landing and stuff like that. So there are very technical challenges you can do as well. And they've talked about
my mind, that kind of skill.
Oh, right, legit skill in that simulation. There was a discussion. Actually, it was one that Unit Zero was shared in the links about people using the real time weather in Microsoft Flight to fly through the hurricanes that have hit the U.S. recently. And so they're using the real time weather to kind of fly through the hurricanes and see the clouds and how everything was going with that, which is pretty neat. And for me, I've done that also where real-time weather, like I actually was going to fly over a part of Russia that I was curious to see what they provided there. And when I flew in, because I used real-time weather, it was just socked in with clouds. And I think the ceiling or the floor for the clouds was at 0. So I was taking off in almost no visibility. So then I was flying around and I was like, well, shoot, I can't see anything. But I was in a jet and I took this beautiful Learjet that goes up tons of thrust. The cloud height to get above the clouds was somewhere in the range of like 18,000 feet. And then once I got above, it was just clouds to the eye's limit everywhere around me. I was like, well, I'm going to go fly somewhere else. This is not pretty. The clouds look great. Like clouds are gorgeous in the game. And like flying through rain and stuff, amazing. Lightning storms, so good. And I actually found there's a few places, because one of the other things, and I try not to stick too long here on Microsoft Flight, but the weather is amazing to watch. There's a part of it I found in there. If you're searching for locations, you can look up fauna, and some of the fauna engines they have in there are animal like herds. And so you can actually see like a herd of elephants, herd of
that was a thing. That's cool.
Yeah, they have giraffe. Then they have some of like geese and seagulls flying around. So when you fly in those areas, you can actually have a massive amount of like seagulls flying through the air with you, which is kind of neat. But it allows that they're going to be adding more and more of this stuff throughout the world and the engine. In addition, one of the first companies to have just come out with one released a free downloadable high resolution airport in Germany. I forget the name of it. I have to go back and find the actual company. I'll try to find the link for it and put it in the notes. But it's great because this proves that Microsoft is opening it up for modders and add-ons. And there's all these companies that have made careers on all the simulation space out there for providing more realistic terrain, cities, things like that. And this company does everything from train simulator to farm simulator to bus simulator, all the various flight simulators, was it X-Plane, Microsoft Flight, all the other ones. They provide high resolution, high detailed packs for them. So if there's like a favorite area that you want to go check out, these companies will sell you for like 10 pounds or this or that, high resolution renditions of your favorite places, which if you're in the sim community is awesome. Because there's places like, even when I flew with Lily around her home airport, she's like, this is where my flight school takes place. And taxiing me around and talking about stuff like that. There's something about seeing that simulation of things that, at least for me, tickles my soul a bit, right? It's like a combination. If I go into a race sim and I'm able to race on a track that I've physically been on, that just is like, that is so much cooler. And so I'm getting that with Microsoft Flight with all these things. And I know they've already talked about updates with gliders as they're going to bring in, which will have a whole different set of missions and things like that, that we know military aircraft are coming, which is a big deal for people to be able to get in there and fly some of the famous military planes as well as historical.
Of course, yeah.
And so those kind of things will just be phenomenal. And I cannot wait because I'm running all this off of a 1080 and I can run it pretty much max, but at 19 by 10. And I've talked, like my friend Lily just got a 2080 and she went from a 970, an old NVIDIA 970 up to a 2080, few generation jump. And she's just like, it is so beautiful now. So I am looking forward to NVIDIA's 3000 series, which we hear about in 2 days that we'll see the announcement for officially. There's a lot of rumors out there, but the official announcement on the new video cards, because I'm looking at that 3080 pretty hard for an upgrade to go up and skip another generation. 4K, 100 hertz gaming. I want it.
Yep.
So all of that. And yeah, there's already packs out there. Babs just shared a link about flying an F-18 in Microsoft Flight 2020. It's funny because of how many people I know who have picked it up. Because I don't know about others. There's parts where I do challenges. I know I get yelled at all the time for flying too low because I'm sightseeing. But I remember back in the day flying real routes because I was going to fly a route that I myself was going to do in a work trip or something like that. And how cool it was for me to see the sights in the game. And then when I actually took the trip, looking out the window at that time in the flight to say, can I see that same, that same marker, that same thing if I follow the arrows? And just, I don't know, that translation between digital to real life for me is super cool.
So it's funny. The thing that reminds me most of is I remember when I was, I don't even want to think about how old I was, but I remember when when Google Maps was like first a thing. And then when Street View was first a thing.
Oh,
do you remember the first time zooming into your street and be like, oh my God, that's my house. That's so weird.
Yes.
I remember being like amazed by that technology. And now it's just so blasé. Well, yeah, of course we have that. But I think it's just still such an amazing thing. I can't believe that we still have things like Street View. And the fact that you can now fly around the world in effectively real time.
Anywhere.
And the whole world's mapped, etc. That's just so mind-bogglingly
cool. It lets us know how big of these resources there are out there. And this, for me, is a much more positive way to entertain and use these things as well as like just mapping in general. But how cool is it that they took that engine they've been collecting for us to conveniently navigate around the world and turn it into something fun? So, I'm down. All right. With that, it is time for us to let Todd off the reins and say, what is it you want to get a little emphatic about today, Todd?
I have a rant in 3 parts. Part number 1 has nothing really to do with geeky or video or tech or game stuff.
Okay.
It's more of a cultural issue, but I need to understand what the rules are, and I want to crowdsource that understanding because I don't get it, and I'm hoping you can help me. So the name of the professional football team in Washington, D.C. used to be called the Washington Redskins.
Yep.
Mm-hmm. If you've seen their helmet, you should recognize the logo. It's basically the same.
It's essentially a Native American chief
that was on old Buffalo Head nickels.
Yep.
So if you look up Buffalo Head nickel, you look up the Washington Redskins helmet.
It'll be easy to find the logo. Yeah.
Yeah. So with all of the cultural upheaval that's been going on this year, the sponsors of the Washington Redskins team, or the corporate partners, I guess is the best way to describe it, have applied sufficient pressure on the ownership of the Washington Redskins that the Washington Redskins will no longer be called the Washington Redskins. Mm-hmm. They are now just the Washington football team.
As a placeholder until they come up with a different or new name.
And they may not. We'll get to that.
Yeah, because everybody loves the football team.
What I don't understand is if the Washington Redskins is truly that offensive, what is not offensive about the Atlanta Braves or the Florida State University Seminoles? And I'm particularly curious about the Florida State bit because the Florida State University Seminoles have a pregame ritual in which a white guy in war paint and a headdress rides a horse through the middle of the stadium and plants a spear on the 50-yard line while everybody in the crowd is doing the tomahawk chop and the tomahawk chant.
Yep.
I was not aware of this whatsoever because I am so unattached from sport. But it sounds to me like you raised a very valid point, and that should receive the equal treatment and equal disgust of society. And we looked down upon and said we need to change this. Yeah, I agree completely.
Just to be clear, I don't care whether the Washington Redskins in and of itself is offensive, not offensive, is going to be the name that's used, is not going to be the name that's used. But why aren't we treating all of this stuff equally? The reason why is because the Redskins have sucked for 30 years. Well, and no one cares.
So what I would offer into that conversation or consideration, because I've actually, when that first was hitting as a big thing about the Redskins specifically, and the idea that Washington was planning to change its name and come up with something different, I saw the discussion going back and forth about, at least for that team, whether people cared or not. And I saw some interesting conversation. Primarily, the ones I listened to were those around the opinions and thoughts of Native Americans, because that was specific to who you would expect to own any level of offense based on it versus other people projecting what they were concerned about offense. And I did see, because I actually saw back to reports where they were looking 10 years ago and they had done basically a poll to see if the Washington Redskins name should change. And at that time, the percentage was somewhere in the range of 40% of Native Americans in favor of changing it versus 60% who weren't offended or didn't care as much. They did that same poll in the last year and that had flipped. And so it started becoming where over a longer time, Native Americans decided they were less comfortable with that representation. Now, I will also say a specific difference, although that doesn't negate the question as to whether the others should also be looked at, but a difference between the term, the name, the specific thing of Redskins versus Seminoles or Braves is that Redskins was not a tribe and is not a ranking amongst a Native American tribe's people. It was a determination of a way of classifying people, of referring to them as being red-skinned, meaning Native American. That's a good point. Versus an actual tribe name or something like that. So essentially a slang.
Nope.
And so it's like the conversation, which we do have, I think, here in Colorado, of the basketball team. I think that's a collegiate or whatever basketball team that is named it's the something Whiteys or something like that. As a specific, there's a team somewhere in there. It's either Whiteys.
Is that like a high school?
No, it's like it's like a non-school related. I think.
Okay.
But it's discussion. If you were to name any team after what would be arguably named, or anything, right? Arguably after a slang term for a group of people, especially one that was used to negatively or derogatorily classify people, that's where you get into problematic naming and speech. And where the Redskins is much closer to that than Braves, which arguably is a class of warriors or people within a Native American tribe, and Seminoles, which speaks to a very specific location tribe, names of. Do they have their own concerns? Yes. But for me, I lean towards what are those people who should be the target audience for, are they offended or not, saying? And in specific to the Redskins, that poll flipped, and it was also, yes, like you said, in a charged enough time frame that they saw it now, and I can go a step further that you might appreciate, Todd, that they chose this time to say, look, we're doing something to be woke, to be aware, to do something that's been problematic. There's now enough emphasis. Maybe this is the right time. Now, I will say, in addition, that also goes to a lot of the conversations about everything that's going on, especially in the United States, when it comes to various groups and interactions, that when companies especially react to those things happening socially or happening amongst the climate around them, there's a lot of things that happen that sure seem to be lip service or a nice advertising way of saying we are aware of this situation and we can do something that basically costs us no money, but makes us look like we're on the right side of history of arguments. And thus, my opinion being, from a corporate perspective, because I don't think many corporations have a soul, is that they are looking at it from a pure numbers perspective. In the long run, totally. If we do the thing that looks like it is on the right side of history, then we can point back and say, see how good we are? Things like the Aunt Jemima brand syrup, things like Old Ben's rice, those kind of companies that have used, in this case, is black iconic characters that came from very problematic history, because a lot of advertising in the past using soulful type expressions of things, but using caricatures of black folk to push them, that have gotten tamer over time. But when you go to the history, they were not. They were offensive as all get out when they were created. Just like seeing famous people in blackface back in the day, where it was not, oh, just it's blackface. It was like straight making fun of the black people type of things. And so that's that kind of thing. So I can understand with the Redskins if they're following that. But at the same time, do I think that's because they're an amazing corporation, especially amongst the NFL, that is doing wonderful things? No, I think it's solely a monetary thing in the long run.
As an organization, they suck, and they have sucked for 30 years. And I guess, I don't have a problem whatsoever if the team wants to change its name, if people want to say that Redskins now in 2020 is offensive, fine. That's fine. Like, do what you do. They will be the Redskins to me, because that is how I've always known them from the time I started watching football in 1983 till today. Well, so I'm going to have a hard time adjusting. When you go to discuss, and Mika Serrano in the chat mentions that a lot of teams that have Native American imagery are taking heat. I have not seen any of that.
The chant has come up multiple times.
Baseball. It's possible that with all of the sports ball being delayed and or canceled throughout the spring and summer, that like it was on the hot seat for a hot minute, and then it was gone, and we haven't talked about it in 4 months because there was no sports since March or April. Like, I just again, my own perception is that there is a discontinuity between the way these things are being treated.
Well, and I'll say to you specifically on that, Todd.
And again, I don't want to make this too cultural or too political, but the Covington High School kids got crucified supposedly for wearing blackface, but they also wore red face and blue face and yellow face and white face, like black as in the color black, right? Not as in we're going to pretend like we're black people.
Well, and that's a very specific thing when you talk about blackface and stuff like that. I've always thrown it in there. It depends on what is a thing being represented. Are you representing a type of people and doing it mockingly? Well, F you. Are you doing it? I will say, to your point, Todd, in the article I shared in the link there, specifically a quote from it as they're talking about that specific thing about the Seminoles. And it says, there's nothing inherently offensive about the name of a tribe or an individual. A racial or cultural identity isn't necessarily a slur. This is the way the Seminole tribe of Florida apparently saw it when questions arose about the university's use of the name. Seminole leaders decided to embrace the honor intended and officially sanctioned it. In other words, they own it as a metaphorical sense. Yep, so that's something fine. Where, again, the Seminole tribe said, peace, we cool.
So literally the people who are being referred to say it's okay, then who can really complain about that? Yeah.
So if I understand what the rule is, and I'm being extraordinarily pedantic because I hate all this culture stuff, but so the rule is, if the tribe from the general area of where the team is located, a la the North Dakota Fighting Sioux, sign off on the name, then it's okay.
Well, again, two things there, because Seminoles are a specific group. Specific group said, we're cool. Redskins is a potential racial slur versus a tribe to say, hey, is this cool?
If you wanted to keep the iconography, you would have to go find the specific tribes of Indians.
If you still wanted to use a Native American connotation, and that was your point of what Washington wanted to do. So if they wanted to celebrate a Washington-based Native American tribe or something like that, they could probably find a way to do that. And again, as long as they did that and said, hey, tribe, what do you think? And they're like, yeah, do that. Then I'd be like, sure, go.
No problem.
But I mean, this is one of those subjects.
I needed to crowdsource what the rule was because I don't get it.
Yeah, that was one of those things that
I understand it better.
That I was aware of.
That's the kind of thing that I think discussions like this are needed, because I think a lot of people would rather not. Would they rather say I don't get it and therefore I'm not going to try to get it, and that's
not
really
have the
bad.
conversation.
I think when people actually say I don't get it and I want to understand why this is hurting people's feelings and what makes it different, and it doesn't make sense to me.
Okay, so
that's good.
The etymology of the word is obviously offensive. Like there were points at which publicly the word redskin was used to refer to a Native American in a derogative way.
Yeah.
Like I would not even pretend to dispute that. To me, I always, and again, I guess I'm the worst sort of person to talk about or render an opinion on this stuff. To me, it always felt like a celebration because there's not going to be a Milwaukee Steelworkers, right? That pro team is never going to exist. Like the closest thing that they have is the Green Bay Packers, and they're called that because the very first team that was put together in 1919, all the people worked at a meatpacking plant. And that's how they got the name.
That makes sense. Yeah,
right?
That absolutely makes sense.
So, like,
there's certainly discussion to be had about if there's ways to positively embrace racial names, I guess, in teams and such. But I think it comes with such a danger because, if they play badly and you say they suck, you're suddenly saying a race sucks, right? So I think
that's all context. That's all context.
Right.
But I think, this is a thing I do advertise, much like you said, Ken. A big shout out to anybody who has those curiosities, those concerns, those lack of understandings kind of thing. Ask. The best thing we can do in the climate that's happening around the world today, especially what I see in the U.S., don't be afraid to actually ask. If you need to find someone that you're a little more comfortable with, please do. I've had friends come to me and ask me about racially charged issues, and I will admit I'm not an expert in many ways because I grew up in a certain aspect of racially segregated or not situations my whole life. I was mostly unaware of, and only more as an adult have I been more aware of things that specifically interacted with me. But I've had those conversations with some of my friends who were like, hey, I need help understanding. I see a lot of things and I don't understand this piece. Why does this matter? Why is this a concern? And I will freely throw out there again that I've said in the past, when it comes specifically to what's happening about black culture in the U.S., one of the YouTube channels I appreciate is what ex-NFL star, I'm going to forget his name right now, but the series he has on YouTube, which is Uncomfortable Conversations with a Black Man.
Oh, you're that guy.
I highly recommend, because while his answers are not totally representative of the entire black community, he does take a big piece of I'm trying. I think he has really smart conversations in a really good way. And if he doesn't answer all your questions or get you in a place where you feel like you understand better, it's a great starting point to go beyond that.
Yeah.
And that's true of, I don't care what race it is, find people across the board. It just happens to be right now in the United States, there's a severe conversation about the issues that the black Americans are dealing with, black U.S. citizens are dealing with. And so that's what that is currently elevated in the discussion.
And, I've seen a lot of people also say, though, that they're very uncomfortable with having to educate people. And they'll say things along the lines of, it's not my job to educate you about black culture.
I will say this.
I've seen people saying that online and stuff.
Well, I understand that too. I've commented.
I get that. It isn't their job. I get that. Like if you can't just demand somebody teach you something, of course. But I think what you're saying, Wayne, and what this other guy, the ex-NHL, what was he? I don't even know the sports thing.
American football, and he's an NFL guy, right?
NFL. That's the acronym. I don't even know the acronyms. That's how
Emmanuel
sports.
Emmanuel Acho.
I think the people who are standing up and saying, "I'm willing to be an educator on this from my own perspective." I think that's a fantastic thing, and I have a lot of respect for these people. And while I agree, it isn't necessarily every single black person's job to educate white people on, racial topics. Of course it isn't. It's not their job to do anything. They're not forced to do anything, just like anybody isn't forced to do anything if they don't want to do it. But I have a lot of respect for educators out there anyway. There is also a lot of other stuff that can be consumed, including literature, TV shows, and such that you can watch and review and consider and contemplate, and that's a good way to educate yourself on other cultures as well. You don't necessarily have to quiz people, right? There are other ways as well. So if you don't personally know anybody that you can ask, look around online, like check out Goodreads, check out Netflix, see the stuff that's available. There's a lot of even on Spotify now, there's actually lots of playlists that are like BLM inspired, etc. And it's a good way to learn about these other issues that you might not be comfortable asking somebody about.
Ken, you didn't know it, but you prompted the segue. I love it. Part 2. I went to Netflix.
Okay.
I was looking through the list of shows, and I saw this show called High Score.
Oh yeah. I have been hearing a lot about it, but I have not seen it. That sigh tells me
so the blurb in the trailer is it's going to chronicle the history of the video game. Okay? This is not a unique story. It's been told several times. There's a lot of urban legend about it. The rise and fall of Atari, which for me is available on Viaplay, I think. Yeah, on Viaplay. But it's certainly been available on Netflix in times past, so you probably can find it on a streaming service some way, somehow. It's a really good look into Nolan Bushnell and the formation of Atari and the engineering and creation of the Atari 2600, like leading up to the video game market crashing in 1983. Okay, so I sat down and went, oh, it's going to be a history of video games. That's cool. I like that idea. We know how this story goes. Genesis for video games. Chapter 1, verse 1, Tennis for 2. Chapter 1, verse 2, Space War. Chapter 1, verse 3, Colossal Cave Adventure. Chapter 1, verse 4, the Atari 2600, essentially.
Okay.
Or
so
Pong,
back all the way down.
Pong.
Okay, so Pong. What first, did they focus on?
Chapter 1, verse 5, the Atari 2600. At the end of Chapter 1, verse 5, E.T., the Pac-Man port, and the video game industry implodes on itself. Yeah?
Okay, so what did they focus
really
on then?
Simple. Really hard to pack into a 42-minute a 42-minute episode, considering there's the documentary about Atari that I mentioned before that's like an hour and a half. There's a documentary about the landfill that all of the unsold ET cartridges supposedly got buried in.
Oh yeah, that urban legend. Yep.
That one's an hour and a half. So again, lots of urban legend about this, and a lot of really good and rich history about it. So I sit down and I watch the first episode. And we're having and the person that's being interviewed won the first National Space Invaders tournament.
Okay.
What does that have to do with the history of video games?
Well, okay, so you said that's kind of what's on the billing, that it's a history, or because I just saw the thing about it's being called High Score. So for me, I was thinking this is going to showcase people who had achieved high scores throughout video game history, kind of like what King of Kong did about that.
I would have given it a pass if it was going to be 6 hours of esports propaganda, right? But that's not what they're going for. The episode synopses were the video game industry up until the crash. Nintendo shows up in 1985. Then Street Fighter 2 and the fighting games happens. Then Wolfenstein and Doom and PC gaming becomes a thing. And I don't even remember what the episode after that was, like the fifth or sixth. I don't even remember. But the person who won the first national video game tournament is as relevant to video games as who won the first professional football world championship is to the modern NFL.
I can agree with that.
It does not matter. It does not matter. And then I came to the realization it was a cultural thing.
Okay.
Why is that?
Because the person's trans.
So
you think this is going to bring in views?
And so that's why they're there. Right? Because video games has this terrible representation problem, and it's always been marketed to straight white dudes, and all of this cultural stuff that I've been sort of on the periphery, sort of poking at, fighting with for 5 years. When I was writing at Tech Raptor and sort of after online. So then the other thing that they did is they interviewed the family of the guy who apparently invented the ROM cartridge, who I had never heard of. So it was kind of interesting to me, in as much as, this person came up with it first. But can I ask you a question? Who invented calculus?
Pythagoras, didn't he?
No. Pythagoras invented geometry. Well, no, that would be Euclid.
I don't know off the calculus? Top.
I'll give you a hint. It was 1670.
I forget the actual name of the person, but it comes to mind because I've seen memes about it. Yeah, Isaac Newton.
Okay.
What?
Was it Isaac Newton?
Yes, it's Isaac. Yeah. Yes. So the answer that everybody's going to give you is Isaac Newton. Do you know who Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz is?
No, but only because I see the Wikipedia ad that says that, or the article that says that puts him in line with it about the history of calculus.
Yes, he's the guy who also invented calculus nearly simultaneously with Isaac Newton. And nobody knows who he is because Isaac Newton wrote the Mathematica Principia that everybody knows about because it describes Newtonian gravity.
Okay.
Right? Okay. So there's a guy who invented the ROM cartridge, and I admit that is interesting. Apparently, some amount of time before the Atari 2600 came out, but everybody knows about the Atari 2600. Yeah?
Yes.
Same basic scenario. So while I again agree, an interesting data point, factoid in the history of video games, why are they there? And I'm not going to go into it any more than to say, in my opinion, it's another cultural thing. And I'll end this there. I'm not watching any more of this series, but by all means, your mileage may vary.
Well, so why do you think it's necessarily a bad thing to have that as a cultural thing?
Well, because Todd, you did say that everyone knows those other histories. And from what you've mentioned so far are all things I have no history of, that I do not know the names of these people or what they've done. And so I'm curious, is there kind of what Ken's saying there, is there not value to telling additional stories in the gaming world that isn't the same story we already have via, like you said, the books that are out there, all the other things that we've seen out there? I will throw out there at the top of this before we go further into it. One of my favorite versions of the history of video games is the anime High Score Girl on Netflix that talks about, it's amazing, right? Especially arcading. But there are so many ways to capture history of video games that, and I say this because I look at the article from The Verge that I linked, and one of the things they set out there is they say Netflix High Score sets out to, or it says, sorry, above this, the story of video games is too often told by the same kind of person. Reports have extensively detailed the ways the video game industry has centered its orbit around men and boys, particularly white men and boys. And homogeneity, I can't say that right, often extends to the people who are allowed to tell the story of games. Writers who were at the medium's nativity and made a career of chronicling video game history are also frequently from the same background, blind to the ways in which they are treated as the default and in turn further the narrative. Netflix high score sets out to amend this in a very brief history of the video games that span the 80s to early 90s, when the games leapt from the arcade cabinets to home consoles, ending just as 3D games arrive on the scene. Creator Frances Costrell goes out of her way to center frequently overlooked figures in the industry to a degree that is legitimately surprising, yet it still fails to offer a clear-eyed view of the industry. So right there, their indication is you can see a very focused approach.
It doesn't go far enough.
But it doesn't actually capture the whole industry. So I think the criticism's value is fair in that the way they build it as being potentially this bigger thing, it's not.
Frame it. Just frame it differently. Don't tell me you're going to tell me the history of video games, because I know some of it because I care. Right?
Yeah. Well,
and
you follow the things you like.
History to go in and find this stuff out. Like I can't name you names, but if I hear the name, I'll go, oh yeah, that's the guy that did this thing, right? And I just watched The Rise and Fall of Atari again in the last couple of days because this show left such a bad taste in my mouth that I wanted to watch a historical nonfiction show. And I guess the problem is that, to me, with a blurb like that, with the runtime that we're talking about, 6 hours, right, you can deep dive stuff, right? Because it's urban legend that it was just E.T. that caused the collapse of the video game industry. Like, and nobody talks about how shamefully bad the Atari 2600 port of Pac-Man was.
Oh, that was so bad.
Disgracefully bad.
Yes.
Like E.T. takes the hit for being the worst video game of all time.
It was bad.
No, it's terrible.
The Atari Pac-Man still had the mechanics, but it was bad.
It sucked.
Atari Missile Command was decent. And I say that mostly for Babs because I remember the day that I walked out and he played it for hours.
So funny side note, the same guy who designed E.T. for the Atari 2600 also did Yar's Revenge.
Oh, really?
Yeah. So
how do you do that?
Both,
like,
arguably the best game on the 2600 and the worst video game of all time.
I was going to say, how do you get that range? Well, that's not true. I know the history of E.T., and it was such a rush job to try to meet advertising constraints for the movie that there's reasons it failed. It failed. Yeah, so it's not necessarily the programmer's fault. It was the whole industry thing it was within. All right. I think we can tell a thing back off this, but I will say that I agree, Todd, in the sense that the billing was perhaps inaccurate, much like a lot of the advertising out there is they're trying to gain larger audiences. They're not really necessarily, they're selling an idea versus what the real content is. And that's something I think is legit criticism. But I don't think there's any reason to say that it doesn't, like so many contents of entertainment out there, maybe not for everyone. And therefore, I also respect your decision to say you have no interest in continuing it. Like, there's no reason for you to force yourself to watch it for some whatever. I've been curious. I was looking at this. Just some of the people they interview about, like Richard Garrett and stuff. I'm always interested. Hear stuff he says because.
Sure, I want to hear from Roberta Williams too, but I also want to hear from Stevie Case, right?
So, but
for those that don't know, Stevie Case got a job at id after she won a video game tournament.
I remember that.
A Doom deathmatch tournament, and they gave her a job, right? Like, she's better than everybody else here. Design levels for us. Like, that's a story that's not been told. Well, it has been in book form. It's never been told in documentary form, and it's one that I know about, and it's one that nobody ever touches on.
And I think there's a specific thing to be able to say, like, there are other stories that should probably be covered. However, we need to take a break so that people can bio. I noticed that my drink is basically done, as I've heard that criticism in the past, that we need to let people take a moment to themselves, to whatever they may need. And so we're going to take a break. We're going to listen to, inspired by Todd's discussion, a song from OC Remix, this one from Final Fantasy Tactics called Teach Me How to Rave. And so we're going to be listening to that to the break, and we'll be back in just about 4 minutes to continue the conversation and then to get into a little bit of discussion on, is the gaming community fractured? So with that, you're watching VtWShowX on Twitch. We're happy to have you, and check with us right after this.
You're listening to ShowX on VtWProductions.com.
Hey everybody, welcome back to the show. Sorry, we had to finish up our little rant in the break before I came back on air. Show hosts only. Don't mind us. But welcome back, everybody. I want to, and maybe Todd will hold on to potentially the end piece of that for the tail of the show if we don't finish out, because admittedly, I don't know how much content and discussion there'll be around our main subject today of what I wanted to bring in about the fracturing of the gaming.
Sure, I'll save part 3 for the end. It's not important.
Yeah. If nothing else, we'll bring it up in the future.
There's a review for Ghost of Tsushima out there. that dropped in the last week that is in the running for the worst piece of gaming journalism of all time.
Which I think is a valid thing to look at, because even how even how the discussion came up about your initial response to The Last of Us 2 and how you were able to see a little different view later. I'll be curious to hear about that one in the future. All right, so I want
to hit a comment that was in the chat real quick before we make the transition. So Hando said that I would probably be a Gunter, meaning egg hunter from
You would be
Ready
really
Player One.
good at it.
And here's the problem with that. I had this 18-month period in my real life where I could have done basically that and couldn't do it because as soon as video games becomes my job, I don't want to play them anymore.
That is a
really weird
challenge. No, that is a.
But I gotta have a job. I gotta have that 9 to 5.
There's a problem.
I play tons of video games. It's true, but to be obsessed to that level, I can't.
There's a piece there where I always talk about how I don't consume as much media in the sense of like streaming and things like that as probably a lot of our viewers. And a part of that is because when you create, I don't want to find myself mimicking aspects of other shows and things like that, let alone my time is spent elsewhere to prepare for creating. Such that it's hard. Like I watch YouTube videos that are very specific about content that I want to talk about, but I don't watch other streamers often. And it's tough for me, right? And in a similar way, because it becomes a different thing for me because I do it. If that makes any sense.
Not as we make it look.
Yeah, hopefully y'all see that easy. Anybody can have a stream, just let you know.
Skull.
But so as we get into the conversation, I did have another thing I did want to bring up. It was a tail on to what we're discussing, but just because it's relevant, I want to make sure I mentioned it. But that is rest in peace, if you will, to Chadwick Boseman, because the actor for the Black Panther series, yes, a huge salute and cheers to, because holy cow, not something I will admit I knew anything about.
I didn't either, no.
Right? I had no awareness that he was as sick as he was with cancer. And to know that he did all the things he did while being that sick and still promoting, and the reaction, I saw videos and so many things posted in celebration of him and reactions of how hard he worked and how much he wanted to portray that character in the positive aspect. Shout out. Oh my God. Like God. He really did do an amazing job. And shocked, saddened. Everyone knows. All my geeks. I realized how many geeks are in my feeds when the whole wall yesterday turned into just like rest in peace kind of thing. So our peace out to that on that, because not happy. But what do you do? It's one of those things I think everyone agrees cancer's a bitch.
Yep. Yeah, I was never a fan of the Black Panther film itself. I don't know. It didn't really resonate with me. I just didn't really it was fine. I enjoyed it. It just wasn't like it to me. It was kind of like the Thor movies in the sense that I enjoyed them. They just weren't great for me. But when I saw the charity work that guy did, he's done so much over the years. He worked so hard, and he became a big role model for a lot of people. And it's very sad to see somebody who, actually, let me rephrase that. It was really good to see that he made the most of his life. I think he did a lot of, he achieved some things that, and set himself as a role model for so many people that's so difficult to do when you're trying to battle cancer at the same time. That must have been hell. He must have been in pain through all the filming, through all the interviews, all the other stuff that he's done. And I think it's awesome that he managed to stand up and be a role model while battling cancer. So much respect for
excellent human being. So throwing that out there. All right. So today's topic, and this is totally for me, and feel free to flame me as you will if you are not interested. But in all these conversations we keep having about gaming and my history and remembrance of all the times I've enjoyed throwing game fests and LAN parties throughout the years to playing online with friends and all these things all the way back, one of the things that I keep running into today is how it feels like to me that the gaming industry, fan base, users, everything about it is perhaps not what it once was. Now, that's a cheesy way to put it. That's almost a cop-out. What I mean by that is that it almost seems like there's just too many options. I come back to the old transition of the old WoW Radio to VTW Productions into VtWShowX. Even just our community outreach and where we converse, hang out, and chat with each other. Things like the history of going through from old-fashioned IRC to Ventrillo to Teamspeak to now
Discord.
where we are in Discord, as well as having the Twitch channel and such. All of those different things, right? To us having things like, as I get back to my notes, just how there's like so many different places to play video games, from mobile to all the different consoles to the PC to the level of number of games that exist today. One of the hardest things I have, and this is the subtext to what I was putting on the show, is it's hard to play with my friends. And I don't know if any of you guys also feel that. But one of my examples I'll put out there, and I don't know, and part of my discussion why I bring this up is maybe I'm wrong. Maybe it's all for the best, and I'm just a curmudgeon and old and wish to be back in my old simple ways. But I go back to times where even if I wasn't a participant, everyone in the LAN parties and stuff I'd go to and Game Fest and stuff were playing WoW together, right? There was a time we'd show up at a LAN party and everybody loaded WoW. And I was like, but games like Unreal Tournament and other things, can't we play these? But there's been a situation I've run into where I remember my own gaming experience from the original of me playing couch co-op with people in my neighborhood, right? My siblings, other people around me, sitting down at the console, playing two-player Mario Brothers together, playing, RC Pro-Am, all these kind of games that we would play together right there was always such a blast. To going into the PC realm and playing things online like Unreal Tournament and up to the Unreal Tournament Game of the Year edition, stuff like that we all went in there and just whenever we would get together, it was like a whole drove of us would show up in the same game. And we'd all be playing those games together. And it was amazing. Yet today, at least for me, I can look at and be at my Steam list right now, right? And this is like real time. I can see that like Tabaxi and Woden are playing 7 Days to Die. I have friends playing Phantasy Star Online 2. People playing They Are Billions, Microsoft Flight Simulator, Babs, to Dynasty Warriors 8, to Elder Scrolls 5, Gloomhaven, Factorio, Final Fantasy 14, Black Desert, Shroud of the Avatar, Terratech, Stellaris, Raft. These are all just people online right now playing all these different games, and like only 2 sets of them are playing together. And so one of my challenges is it seems so hard for me today to actually sit up and sit down and play with my friends. Mm-hmm. And I don't know if there's a way to fix this. So, to you guys.
So, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I'll ask the question. Do you really want it to be fixed?
So that's the thing I'm not sure of.
For the very small pool of your friend set, I 100% get it, and I'm on board. I have tried to create a handful of gaming communities since starting ONHVW back in the day.
Yep.
We were moderately successful one, and have catastrophically failed every other time.
Agreed.
Right? The last attempt was when Destiny 2 originally dropped. I started a Discord server and invited people who said that they were interested in playing. If we could come up with 6 people who are going to be on regularly, we could do all the content together.
Right?
Right? Akin to the original 4-man that we had when World of Warcraft first dropped eons ago, where it was Hordak, John Paul, Serpensor, and myself.
Yep.
And Serpensor, that's an elemental. Just to let him know, he can banish it. So I too have not been successful. However, gaming is so much bigger than it was 10, 15 years ago that I don't know if I want it to consolidate, because the fractionalism that you're talking about is very certainly real, but I consider it a good thing because Reset Era exists because of it. And if gaming collapses in on itself, all of the Reset Era people are going to be crapping up the forums of your favorite video game instead of being in their own bubble.
Okay.
So that the decent people can ignore them. Right? So, good. That's good.
Okay.
Sorry, could you define reset people? Is this like cancel
Reset
culture you're
era?
talking about?
Reset
Okay.
Era people. It's a gaming forum. It was, oh gosh, what was it before Reset Era? It was something else, and then there was a problem with the guy who owned something else, so a bunch of the mods split off and created this thing called Reset Era. It's terrible human beings talking terribly about the video game industry in the name of correct politics.
Gotcha.
And I want them to stay there. Like, I don't go there. I would never even dream to start an account or post or anything, because as soon as I posted, I would get banned. But like, I'm not gonna go into your community at all. I promise you. So you can stay in your bubble and not crap up the Destiny 2 forums or the EU4 subreddit or the Paradox Interactive forums. You can just stay in your bubble.
So what you're basically saying is that for you, having such a large and diverse community allows people who want to share an opinion about aspects of gaming, the games they enjoy, whatever it is they get out of the experiences they try to have, to comfortably exist where they want to exist and not necessarily spill over to where you enjoy existing.
So I have a law, because I'm a mathematician and a physicist by education and an engineer by trade, so it's what I do. And it's the inverse square law of community size. So a community's quality is directly proportional to 1 over the square of its size. So WoW at 12 million subscribers was 1/25 trillionth as good as WoW at 7 million subscribers, which is self-evidently true. This Wrath of the Lich King was terrible.
Is that the game or the community? Sorry.
The community.
But is the game as good as the community, or the community is as good as the time?
Quality of the community is directly proportional to 1 over the square of its size.
Okay. What about Dota 2? That became more concentrated, toxic over time.
Well, again, if it depends. It depends on if you think toxicity. Like, I would never play a public game of Dota 2 to begin with. Like, I would only ever play that game with my friends.
Gotcha.
So, like, again, there's a lot of other intersecting things, like situational awareness. Like, I know this community is terrible, so I either insulate myself with a friend set, right, to play the game.
Yep.
For example, Dota 2. Or,
in League of Legends, you just play ARAMs.
Gentler version, like League of Legends.
Yep, you just play ARAMs, and then you don't have to worry about it.
That's very kind of you to say about League of Legends community.
Oh no, the community in actual play in like 5-man Summoner's Rift is toxic as all get out. Just like I found in almost every competitive mode of any game I played has a severely toxic community. When I played Overwatch and was going just through the ranked mode thing to get tiered, I had so much flame and hate thrown at me where I haven't even gotten through the ranking method to put me in the bottom tier where I belong, and was already getting called out for being a terrible player. Like, I'm in the ranking matches. What do you expect? Like, come the F on. And that was so toxic, I have not touched competitive since.
It's almost as if the gaming companies were so desperate to sell dupes on esports that they never bothered to realize that 99.9999% of the player base can't handle competitive modes.
Oh yeah, like, no, most people can't. Most people can't do it emotionally. They don't have the ego to support that they're not as good as they want to be or think they are. They don't, and one of the things I've experienced is they don't have actual groups of people that are willing to commit what it takes to actually play at a competitive level, meaning time and focus and training. And I've run into that myself. And I've realized I will support people who want to play competitively, but if they don't choose to put the time in that I realize is necessary, then why bother doing it? Because you're just going to go and build yourself up to get beat down even harder. So
Yep.
one of the things you mentioned, Todd, that was a part of this discussion for me is where you said trying to create those communities, and you specifically mentioned Discord. Because for me, one of those challenges has been, there were times, like you said, that we had groups of people congregate around Ventrillo or around, as we progressed, Teamspeak. And now that we have a dedicated Discord server for VTW again, for the VTW gaming aspect, which is all of us versus the world, all of us who choose to wear the moniker against, I think it's catchy. I think that's part of the whole thing that came out of your show originally that I really like. One of the things that gets me is it seems like no matter where you go, especially, and I heard this from Hando, when you go in and you start following people on Twitch, every different streamer has their own personal Discord server.
Yep.
And therefore, the only thing you do is you join a Discord to play with the community or the people that also watch that streamer. And that annoys the crap out of me. Because for me personally, and this again, maybe I'm just an old curmudgeon and I'm not in it and up to it with the kids today, but I look at my Discord and I feel like I'm out of whack here to a degree, but I've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 different Discord channels. And I know, because I talked to Hando a little bit, that ain't nothing. That ain't beans. That I only have like 10. Because I have ours, I have the gaming group that I do D&D with. I have a friend of mine who's trying to start streaming to support, another friend who's trying to create her own community I'm trying to support. I've got Asteroid Blues, who I do the Star System with. I've got a family one. I've got admittedly, everyone who has a Oculus or any kind of VR that does Beat Saber should have the Beat Saber community because that's where all the mods are. And the last one, the Bastion or something I think I have, is another group of gamers that I had originally played other stuff with. But in doing so, it kills me because what you end up running into in my experience is I have to go to this Discord to play this game. I have to go to this Discord to play with these people. I have to play this Discord because I'm following that guy I want to support. And what my goal has always been with the VTW Discord is to say anybody who is loosely associated with the concept of this idea of a group of us versus everyone else gaming, like we're going to competitively or not competitively, but get together and as an effort try to project ourselves into these different games.
We're gonna play together, win or lose. It's us against the world.
Right? We could congregate in the versus the world servers. Because I'm not trying to present this. It's not the ShowX Discord, right? It's a gaming community Discord, and I am happy that other people join in. We've had minor success because we have a lot of us who are on there playing, like Call of Duty has been a big one lately. Whenever I play the Warzone free Battle Royale mode, whenever I've played League of Legends, I'm in there. And we have a bunch of different games in there because the purpose of it is to allow people to get in there and play whatever games they want. We constantly, and this is one of the ones that I've never been to, and I don't know the people in it, but we have this survival builders tab in there that we always have people in that I think Tabaxi and a bunch of others show up in. And I don't know any of them, but that's what I want.
I think that's a bunch of like real life friends they've sort of like pulled in, which is great. Yeah.
And it's one of those things I want to have people come over and like play with others and find others who are just have that same general mentality to play those games together versus, if I'm playing this game, I have to go to this Discord. Like come to this community and find others to play with. Sorry, Todd, go ahead. Oh no, don't tell me that as soon as I was going to give him open, it froze on it. So hopefully his hiccup will come right back as he was just about to join into the conversation there. But looking back at that, right?
Well, that happens anyway. That's fine because I had a retort to Todd's original question, which was, is this something that we want to save? And I think that times changed, right? I think that in the era of World of Warcraft's initial release, 2006-ish era, right? Sorry, Todd, you disconnected.
I know I died.
I was responding to your original question, but back in the original, 2006 era of World of Warcraft, true classic, not classic. There was a time when you used to play with friends, and that was great. I think that a large part of it is because the age of the people we're talking about. I think that when we talk about people who are, when I was 2006, I was 15, 16 years old. So for me, I had a lot of free time. I mean, I put something like 1.5 years of my life by the age of 19 which is insane, by the way. Even if you're 100 years old, that's still 1.5% of your life. Never mind when you're 19. Like I used to do nothing but play games, do school, and sleep, right? And that was like a thing.
That is a solid gamer attitude.
Like I don't know about you guys and your time availability, but I certainly don't have the time to do that kind of gaming, like raiding, like I used to do, and I definitely couldn't organize it with people. Like, can you imagine getting 20 or 40 people together in one evening a week? Never mind the really required 3 or 4 evenings a week.
No, Ken, and that was why World of Warcraft never took off amongst our friend set in Colorado.
Okay, that's interesting.
Right? Like there was a subset. There was a piece that did, and then others who didn't. Yeah.
Sure, there was easily 10 of us that were good enough players that when the 10-man content came out, that we absolutely could have done all of it. Like we were good enough. There was no way we were going to get everybody to sit down at the same time on a, semi-weekly basis, twice weekly basis to do that content, let alone do the work offline. And I say work, meaning the expenditure of effort, to do the work to know what build you're supposed to have for the top level, like cutting edge.
Oh yeah, that was
1% of the 1%, whatever you want to say, a median plus 3 standard deviations content. Right? So, yeah. Sorry to go back after I got cut off. Much like my definition of gamer, being VTW is a state of mind, right? The etymology of the original show was the fact that Hordak and I had opinions about things gaming wise that nobody else had. And so we would be at a game fest having debates about video game stuff, and it always seemed to devolve into Kyle and I against everybody else. Oh, I just outed him. Whoops. I do that.
Who's going to find him these days? Who's going to find him?
I don't think he cares.
Yeah.
If not, he's welcome to come back and yell at us on the show.
Yeah, he's always welcome.
Because I know everybody would love to hear from Hordak.
No kidding. Me,
including us.
More than most.
Hey, I've always said he has the best storytelling ability of anyone I've ever met.
Yeah, he sure does. He sure does. So yeah, I mean that was the etymology of the original podcast, and we tried to grow a community out of that, and that was why we went with Versus the World Productions. Because I wanted to, I mean, this is a little deep lore about stuff that doesn't matter anymore, but when WoW Radio was folding, I had a decision to make. Because the property was made available to me and then recommended that I not take it. And the alternative was to split up and create my own thing. And it was like, great, we could take the VTW state of mind and turn it into the brand for what we're gonna do. So yeah.
No, and that's so. It's one of those things that and it's funny because on the Facebook video that I'm throwing out, someone just said, "Oh, your Discord, I'll have to go check it out." And so I shared a link there. But there's a piece there that, and what I'm trying to propagate for everyone is an opportunity for people to kind of come together, because as much as I agree, because there's the piece of one of the sub questions of there is are there too many options? Because I talk about everything from the ways we communicate, and I even down to when I used to play games via Steam Chat voice, which has actually gotten really good, and it sucks because all these options are actually pretty darn good. Let alone in-game chat, because almost so many multiplayer games now include their own built-in game chat, which is surprisingly good. But there's a level of like, for me, there's too many places to buy games, right? And to own them. We always talk about the fracturing of the game stores and how I can go to, on my desktop right there, I see the Toby Game Hub, the Oculus Game Store, the NVIDIA GeForce Now streaming service, the Origin, RSI for Star Citizen, GoG Galaxy, Uplay, Battle.net, Epic Games Shortcut, all those right there, as depending on which game I want to play, where I have to go. And therefore, when I get to that game, where's my friends list on that one, right? I open Battle.net to see my friends who are going to play Call of Duty Warzone or Overwatch or something there. I go to Steam to see most of my gaming group and people on Steam, right? I go on Discord, thankfully, actually, it's a little bit of an aggregate, and see what a lot of people are gaming on Discord and stuff like that. And it's just like, man, it's so hard just to get a group together, right? And on top of that, right, we deal with the fact that, even as we talked about a few weeks ago with the different options for where you play your games, the fact that not nearly enough games today are crossplay. Because I feel like even if we have such a plethora of options out there, because I'll at least concede, one of the challenges is there's so many damn good games being produced. Even though forever the percentage of games being produced are majority bad, so many games are being produced that the actual number that are good is still more than I have time to consume. And in doing so, I can't fault my friends for choosing to enjoy games that I don't want to ever try. Back in the day, when Unreal Tournament Game of the Year came out, to play an FPS multiplayer game, that was it. You had that and like Quake 2 into Quake 3 kind of thing, right? You had Unreal Tournament. And because of that, I could get 20 people to get together and play Unreal Tournament. And it was amazing. I can't say that now.
Imagine only having one FPS available.
You weren't even there for this. It was it may have been at Sleaze Queen's old house.
Yeah, I'd never been to Sleaze Queen's, so.
We played, and we were playing Capture the Flag on a map called Newark's Elbow.
Okay.
And the one flag room was in a ship. It was an asymmetric map. So one flag room was in a ship and the other flag room was in a cave. And there were two basic routes to get between the ship where the one flag was and the cave where the other flag was. And we started a game at about 2:00 in the afternoon on a Saturday. And at like 8:30 or 9 that night, after no flags had been scored in 7 hours,
woo,
called it a draw.
Oh my god. That's insane.
So much fun. We had the teams balanced just right. There was a lot of high-level play. There were like a couple of the good players on the opposing team would get together and run in as a little group, and like a bunch of us would get killed, but then one of the guys who wasn't necessarily always like the best would get a rocket shot off and like kill the guy wearing the flag, and then one of us would clutch teleport to get the flag returned as they're running the flag up to their base. Like, it was so good, and we were laughing. So, I mean, it was just like that environment. The early Game Fest when there were like 16 of us, and everybody played the same game,
right?
Like the original, and it's too bad he's not here today. But when we first started playing Battlefield 1942,
Magic Bus,
the Magic Bus, yes. Oh man,
even I got to experience that one.
So Shadow of Ice was getting just barbecued. Like, it just was not. This game was just not his jam, and so he decided he was going to play the role of spoiler, right? So the tanks were pretty, like the vehicles broadly were pretty OP relative to somebody on the ground. But you could drive a vehicle into another vehicle as sort of a ground-based cruise missile. and so that's what he did. And he would shout the magic bus every time he did it.
It was wonderful.
And it was amazing.
Ah, yes.
So,
yes.
like, he would be driving a Jeep, trying to crash it into a tank, and I'd be in a plane trying to scrape the Jeep to prevent it from driving into the tank, and, like, trying to blow the Jeep up before he could drive it. Yeah. All the feels.
Well, right? Because those are those
Right
kind of
there.
experiences we had when you only had so many options. It's down to when people used to homeland play like Halo because they had consoles and they'd have a group of people and they'd show up with televisions to actually do a networked Halo game, right? Those kind of things that I feel like both the good and bad is that we have so many options to play today. There's so many great games that unfortunately it's kind of saturates it and dilutes our experience for those gamers and friends we want to experience it with. Because instead I'm stuck to this level of nostalgia where there's things that I remembered and loved and moments that I don't feel like I'll ever get again. And it's maybe not the worst thing because at the same time, I have a slew of games in my repository that arguably are all amazing and wonderful experiences. Unfortunately, there's another piece to that, which is the fracturing I'll say back to that original is heaven forbid you find a game after its heyday and it's a multiplayer community-based game. So heaven forbid, and one of the big ones for me is like the old multiplayer racing sim games. I'm trying to remember which one was the one that was all around the main island in Hawaii. But there was aspects where you'd play a lot of it online. And if that community has moved on, when you've now acquired and found this game, it's a ghost town and you can't experience it and such. Because unfortunately, there's just so many good games. And I keep hoping, and maybe this is just me, but I keep like watching these Gamescom trailers. And if you guys haven't watched it, you might want to check it out. Maybe we'll talk about it more next week. Some of the things that are upcoming that might be interesting and looking forward to. But the one I will mention is like Star Wars Squadrons, because I don't know if you guys have seen that one or not, but it basically looks like the ancestor, the one we've always wanted, that's not a bastard child of, the X-Wing versus TIE Fighter games. Like, it's going to be the modern update to X-Wing versus TIE Fighters with multiplayer of like 6, or I don't know how big it is actually, squadrons going against each other flying. That looks both phenomenal and looks like it has the flight mechanics of the old games. That I feel like there's a certain nexus to that because so many people are Star Wars fans and pseudo joystick jockeys and just the lore and such that I'm hoping, I keep hoping, I keep desiring some nexus, some focal point for a bunch of my friends that have always gamed to like start coming back to. Like the one game that we're all super excited for, such that even if it's for a moment when it hits, I have all of my old guys playing, right? All the old friends I have playing it. I want so bad for that to happen again.
So one thing that I can talk about, you know, there was a period of time in which like the first-person shooter that we played made the transition away from Battlefield and Unreal Tournament to Call of Duty.
Yep.
And
oh man, that was its own fracture.
The benefits that you got from leveling in the Call of Duty games made that experience unfun for me.
And I heard that from a lot of people that once they had the perks and the kill streaks that came into it, as well as the ability to unlock better guns for your experience of time playing in the game, that it could make people feel like they walked into the game and were at such a disadvantage that they didn't want to play. And I understood that challenge.
I am one of those people.
And that's why I know when I tried to host some of those, because I was aware of those concerns, I tried to do things like no custom loadouts. You could only use the built-in loadouts that came with the game because everybody had them. As well as it sucked because I was trying to self-mitigate that issue, and I understood it.
Yeah.
Because I was one of those ones who had played enough COD that even with a base gun, I could comfortably kill people and didn't need modded guns. And so it didn't really bother me. But I understood the pain others had when they saw someone, especially with some of the admittedly older bad perks or things like the one where when you died, you drop a grenade. and therefore whoever ran over your body would blow up and kill them. The second death stuff
didn't bother me. Like, you made a choice to take that, and there were other things that you like. There was an opportunity cost for taking that, and I'm fine with that. What bothered me is there were a set of guns that just outperformed the guns that you had at low level, just straight up better across the board. And a couple of the people who played Call of Duty specifically religiously just had better guns and were using that, again, one person's opinion, we're using that to own in an environment where, all things being equal, I don't know that they would have.
I agree. And that's one of those situations that I understood the pain people were feeling and the frustration they had because in many ways, when that became the flavor of the month or whatever it was for a time, there were people who felt alienated because of it. And that was some of, like you said, that fracturing, because there were aspects of the game that people didn't like. For me, it was earlier for that. For me, it was Dota 2 and Dota, the original Dota, because for me, I never put the time in. And so when I got stomped, that was such a snowballing effect game that it just was painful every step of the way. I tried to participate because it's like, that's what the team's doing. That's what we're all playing. But it angered me more than any other game I played. So I understood that.
Yeah, you got it from the other side, right? It was Hordak at his own
or any fighting game
level, and then a group of 3 or 4 of us that could take people that had never played before and just it's 8 minutes into the game, and Wayne is getting his entrails pulled out because
with no way of stopping.
Yeah, he and can I say his real name? Your former roommate?
Hostile Prey.
Yes,
my cousin.
That's good. You gave me his handle because I was never going to remember that. That you and Hostile couldn't 2-on-1 me or Sleaze Queen if you caught us in the woods.
It didn't matter. Right? We were just like, and done.
And it's just like, I'm going to barbecue both of you, and yes, I'm going to get that 30 seconds of glee out of the fact that I just, 2-on-1, I just took people 1-on-2, right? Yep. And then Kyle shows up and kills me in 3 seconds, and then,
there's a scale.
Like, well, that's a scale.
Yeah, I always try to talk about the StarCraft 2 fights, or StarCraft 1, fights against Kyle, against Hordak, and how it didn't matter how you set it up, Hordak won. But see, and that's the challenge, right? Maybe I'm just old. Maybe it's just reminiscing, rosy glasses, the history all in sepia, that I think it was just a better time in some way. But because I love playing games today, and I at least get a piece of it with the VTW community and Discord, because I can jump in there, and thankfully people are not gravitating like I hoped in the long term. But I have a few people that are really dedicated to going back there that I maybe don't always play the same game with. But when we do, we do. Because like Lily and I have been playing Flight Simulator together. Earthweaver and I play some League of Legends ARAMs. A lot of people have been playing some Call of Duty. In fact, Stoner's in there right now in Warzone. And I've had a few people jumping into Overwatch and some of these other ones. So there are people showing up, and I can show up there, drop in, and just say like, hey, who wants to play this? And we have the hangout level at the top of our Discord, which is just like, I'm here saying hi. And the one right before saying, look in game, like, anyone else want to play games? I'm open to what games you want to play. And so that's kind of like been my little effort to try to recapture some of that, to bring people back together into one world of gaming so that we can all be like, yeah, we all get it. We all feel the same way, right?
I'm with you.
And so
I'm with you. 100%. 100%. I don't think it's nostalgia. I think there's also a psychological thing that happens where if you're a second or third tier player, and you're a second or third tier player in everything, like everything gets old, right? So imagine that you're like Psycho or Shadow Vice or Like, and I don't mean to bag on them, but like to
Well,
compare,
we all had our strengths, right? We all had places we were good.
You or Hordak or John Paul or me to them, like it's just not. It's just not.
Well, so here's the thing, right?
Made the punching back here. I know that I'm a bad gamer, and I always have been. I can't think of a game that I'm good at. Like I've never been competitive at anything.
So Ken,
I love
Factorio.
Sure. So Ken, here's the hypothetical. You're gonna show up once every 3 to 4 months, starting as early as Wednesday evening through Sunday midday, and no matter what we play, you are never going to be at the top of a leaderboard.
Yeah,
and it's depressing, right?
For days on end.
We had that challenge.
You may have 5 minutes, 5-minute stretches of brilliance, but over the 25 minutes that a death match or a team death match is going to happen, you're going to have those moments of brilliance, but in the long haul, the skill gap is going to make itself known, and you just end up being not necessarily the butt, but you're going to be the subject of a lot of the hazing or razzing that goes on, right? And like 5 years of that, especially if you're in the position where you're starting a family, and your ability to practice.
Oh gosh.
Like I mean, I went to my first 2 Game Fests and said, okay, I know what I need to do. First thing, upgrade my computer. Second thing, start practicing. And so I got to the point where I was doing, I don't know, like a dozen to a dozen and a half capture the map flags against inhuman bots.
Oh gosh,
every day.
Ooh. God, remember? Yeah, I remember when we got good enough to turn on inhuman bots, which.
Yeah, exactly.
Oh, geez. Yeah, no, you're right.
Exactly. And that was what I did, because I can't. Like, that's the competitive streak in me. Like, I can't.
Well, but those are the ones where. Those are the ones where, at least for me, right? That's, I don't know. I always like to adjust. I like those moments where it was top tier, like the old fashioned, just straight up death match in UT. Because for us, one of the challenges I always ran into was the team always wanted to do capture the flag or instagib or something like that. I was like, could we do just like a match old school? Just death match? Because I want to see myself on top of the leaderboard.
Okay. So,
because I was pretty good. Fair,
team deathmatch instagib on Saturday night was my doing.
Well, which was fun, but it turned into hours of, right? And I was like, at some point I was like, can we do another? But I found people liked that because it was an equalizer to a degree, and I could understand.
Yeah, well, the team aspect does level out the skill difference.
Yeah,
right?
for sure.
Yeah, it's funny because Earthweaver's in there saying, "UT, you just run around with the impact hammer, driving people nuts as they want to get revenge in the same way." And yeah, I remember but I remember in any of those games when you got good enough at something that it was like, to make this a challenge, let me choose this weapon. Because yes, the extra FU was let me do nothing but telefrag you this match.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I feel bad for Ken because it's just all this old Game Fest nostalgia.
I'm loving this, guys. This is cool. I'm really I love hearing nostalgia. People get so
passionate. This is when we were playing Jedi Knight 2.
Oh God. I was not good at that.
Hordak and Sleaze Queen decided they were going to have kick contests.
Kick people off the map.
The only thing that they were doing to each other was kicking each other. They weren't using lightsabers. They weren't using force powers. They were just kicking each other. And they would plant themselves in the most central part of the map, usually near a ledge, and just kick each other. And if you happen to wander by and see them, you are going to get kicked. Sometimes by your own teammate.
Oh, yes. Yeah. No, I remember those ones. Or the force pushes, right? When it was just like, this map is nothing but throwing people off the map.
So the one thing that you could do that I only ever did once in that game and was so proud was jumping over top somebody and aligning the cursor right so that you could force pull them up in the air off of a ledge.
Oh,
If you had what was it, force jump maybe?
okay.
Either force jump or force pull that you could get if you just force push somebody off of a ledge that they could get back to the.
Oh yeah, that they could bring themselves
they could
back
get
on.
back to the ledge. But if you did this thing where you chucked them up in the air, like it was a lot harder to get back.
Gotcha.
And I only ever did it once. Like I tried it for probably a half hour, just trying to like jump over top of people and line the cursor upright and chuck them up in the air. And like I said, I only managed to do it once, so I never got any good at it. But it was it was very satisfying that one time.
Well, there are moments. Hey, I always remember for the people who suffered on the UT matches and stuff like that, the moment they did like a full loaded rocket barrage down a hallway, that they had the rocket launcher and they just said and let the spiral rockets go down the hallway, even though they were bottom of the list, but happened to be whoever is top of the list walked around the corner and insta-gibbed because they caught all those rockets in the face. I have seen those moments where that person who shot the rockets, that made their night. They were like,
well,
I killed so-and-so. Yeah.
Yep.
Like that was worth.
I did that to your martial arts teacher at one of the last ones that I went to before I moved to Norway.
Yeah.
Just the blind shot through a hallway, and all of a sudden he's like, whoa. So the funny thing is, from my perspective, I fit that thing in between two columns at an angle that it was like, there's no way I'm making this. Like, there is no way I'm making this shot.
So to bring
like,
back this,
I got the, that was when they did the little corkscrew thing like this. And like, it was in 2K4.
Gotcha.
It was an Unreal Tournament 2K4, and so they did this sort of spirally pattern. And I shot him through this just microscopic gap between two pillars, and so that they would go out the door. And your martial arts instructor walked around the corner to come into that room and ate.
I do remember that very specifically.
Salvo.
Full Gibbs. All right, Ken, you were trying to get us back on track. It is time for us to end the show.
We are actually end of time here somehow. So, considering all these nostalgic moments that you had, and all you've got so many memories, right? There's so many times when you can think back and say, "I remember that time when," and it can feel so good to think back on it. And have you had any similar experiences? Not single player. Let's ignore that. But with multiplayer with random people, is that something that's either as common? Like, do you have it as frequently? And if so, or if not, are they as good feeling to think back on?
So the problem I have with the randos is it's like not having anyone to share an experience with. So for me, it's just like when you catch a good movie, right? And if you saw it with friends, it's so much better an experience to go back and reminisce with those same friends who shared it with you. Or even if it is a moment of a movie that you all have seen collectively, even if it wasn't together. If I have an amazing moment in a game with randos, there's no one to share that with. Unless I am streaming and I have fans watching, I can just look back and say, I remember that moment when I got the pentakill in League of Legends, and it was awesome, and I feel great because I was using Soraka, and how the heck does Soraka get a pentakill? But no one I know was there to share it with me. And so unless I can find XJab3342, who happened to be on the same team with me at that time, I don't have that nostalgia reminiscence. It's just this little warm place in the old cockles of my own heart. But it doesn't expand.
I would agree. The nostalgia would be much more personal rather than it would be, I remember this one time when rather than I remember this one time where we.
Yep.
Right? So if I'm talking about a Game Fest thing, like I remember this time where we were doing this.
Yep.
And it's much more of a group, it's a group related memory.
It's the greater thing.
If I'm doing, like, I don't do stuff with randos anyway, as a rule, but any of the Destiny 2 stuff I did with randoms where I did something cool, I can't even imagine what that would be. But like those stories would all be, I remember a time when I was in a rando with blah blah blah.
Yep.
Like that would be the way I would frame that story.
No, I agree. So hey, in all of that, and in all honesty, when I brought this up, it was more just a general like thought exercise about are things too big? Because in a way, I also, at the flip of it, say, what a wonderful time to live and be a geek and be a gamer. Because gosh darn, if you can't find something to enjoy today to an extreme, there's so many good options. We have so much freedom, even from the point of mobile gaming on your dang phone, all the way up to the highest end PC through console and everything. There's so many places to game. Maybe too much, but there's so many.
I'll tell you what, it's something I massively undervalue when I lament about the quality of the average gaming community. That the fact that if things were consolidated, that some of these communities would not even exist.
No, they wouldn't.
And
That's
the games that and even go farther than that, the games that these communities are based around wouldn't necessarily exist.
Which I
right?
love.
Like,
which I love, because thank God we don't all have to live in the same little bubble of a handful of games, because this allows games that I would never give a crap about to exist and have those fan bases love them. Because there's a whole lot of games that I think are garbage, but have massive fan bases, and that's okay. Because I don't have to play that game. I've got 420 games in my Steam list I can try to figure out the time to play. So
yes.
And yeah, I do think it's wonderful.
You know, I bag on League of Legends all the time. It's not like I don't want the game to exist. I just wish the fanboys were a little bit more realistic about what it actually is, rather than. No, right? I'm fine. It's a kinder, gentler Dota.
Oh gosh,
to be nice, right? That's what it is, and that's fine. That's your bag. If death penalties bother you, by all means. It's not for me. But if I'm not playing with my real life friends, MOBAs are not for me. Fair. So it doesn't matter which one I play.
Yep. No, that makes sense. And it's funny because I jokingly, as Unit Zero says, Fortnite. Yes, Fortnite is allowed to exist.
Fortnite is case zero for the fact that good and popular are not the same.
Agreed. All right. We have gone far beyond our time. It is probably time for Ken to go do some trivia with friends and family and things like that. So we should probably
he's going to receive
end our show today. I actually really am appreciative for everyone who participated in the chat today, because we love nostalgia. I mean, Todd and I are just like, but at the same time, I'm happy you guys got to tickle my itch about that conversation about whether or not all the options we have out there as gamers today is too much, is too good. We went around it. I don't know if there's a definitive answer. There are aspects I think that are wonderful. There is aspects that I struggle to accept, but it is where we are. And I think there are ways to combat it. VTW Gaming Channel on Discord, the link's in the chat.
If you want to put like a bottom line, like, is there an answer to this thing? I think the easiest thing to say is that no matter what your interest is, no matter what, like, you may in the real world feel like a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche, right? And the gaming community is so huge and so fractured, to use the term from the show graphic. So huge and so fractured that even though in your real life you may feel like a niche of a niche of a niche of a niche, you can still find people just like you. And it's not bound by geography, and it's not bound by necessarily language, and it's not bound by anything, because we're all more or less connected to each other. So that's a good thing.
That's a really good point, and I think we do kind of forget the fact that we have so many. The problem is that we're spoiled with choice and spoiled with the number of people who we can play with, and it's what a problem to have, right?
Yeah.
How many people out there have struggled to find people they could play a game that they liked with? That's no longer going to be an issue, really. If you're willing to look online, you can find someone.
That's true. So, there's no excuse to be in your own little bubble anymore. Find a bigger bubble that associates with you. Be social.
As much if you want to. And with that, You have been listening to ShowX live on twitch.tv/VtWShowX. Thank you so much for tuning in. We all very much appreciate it. We like having you guys here, and our community really makes this show worthwhile. Thank you also to the, I think, 5 or 6 new subscribers we got today. That was great. We really appreciate that. Growth is important for a community to stay alive, so we are very much encouraging of you guys helping us out by sharing on social media, such as Twitter, Facebook, Reddit, Discords as well. Tell your friends on Discord about us. I mean, hey, that's literally what we're talking about today.
Yeah.
And hey, if you want to get your chance of getting some free games, that's a good way to get you. You can bring in some new subscribers as well, and we'll drop more free keys too. You can also support us on patreon.com/showx. Minimum of $1 per month. That's $12 a year. That's quite a lot of content for a very small price. Much appreciated. And yeah, like I said, just like and share us everywhere. That's the main thing, is the social media stuff. That's what we really need. Take part in the discussion on Reddit, reddit.com/r/VtWShowX, and all that. So thank you so much for listening today, guys. We really appreciate it. Thank you for the impassioned discussions today, both Todd and Wayne. I know I took a bit of a back seat for the past hour, but I've thoroughly enjoyed hearing the nostalgia train, because it's just, I think we all have that, right? I think it's an experience we all have with our own real life friends and online, and I think it's something we can all enjoy hearing. So thank you so much for sharing with that, and I'll leave it to you, Wayne.
All right. No, thank you everyone for joining us this week. And I also wanted to do a shout out because I promised to my friend Mel that I would do so, since right now would otherwise have been Dragon Con, but due to all of that is going on with people trying to stay safe and healthy, people are not congregating in mass amounts, which Dragon Con is absolutely the opposite of that. There, you can check it out virtually if you'd like at dragoncon.org. They're doing a whole virtual Dragon Con for geeks to get in there, see content about all things, because Dragon Con's huge, about anything geekery you might care about. So I promised Mel that I would throw that in that. All right, with that, check us out again next week. And like Ken said, follow us on all the different medias, and feel free to jump in the Patreon. We are out of here. With that, it is time for us to run. Everybody, as Todd is showing, /salute. And we will catch you guys again next week.
Goodbye. See you in the next zombie.
Oops.